You know, the Nobel Prize, it's pretty much the biggest deal in science, right? But have you ever stopped to think about where it all started? Every single legacy has a beginning. And today, we're going right back to the very first Nobel Prize in chemistry to see how it all kicked off.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1901. For the very first time, the Nobel Committee is about to award its prize in chemistry. They're looking for work that has given the greatest benefit to humankind. I mean, this wasn't just some award, this was the beginning of a legend. So who got this incredible first honor, and what did they do to earn it?
And there it is, the official reason: chemical dynamics and osmotic pressure. Okay, I know those might sound a little technical, but they are absolutely fundamental ideas that completely changed how we understand the way chemical reactions actually work. So let's unpack the science and meet the scientists behind this historic prize.
All right, so who was this person? Who was the brilliant mind behind these foundational laws? Let's meet the very first Nobel laureate in chemistry. And there he is, Jacobus Henricus van Hoff, a Dutch chemist whose work was so revolutionary, it landed him the very first spot in one of the most exclusive clubs in all of science. So Van Hoff's story starts out in the Netherlands. That's where he was born, got his education, and built his early career as a professor in Amsterdam. But his ambition? Well, it eventually took him to a super prestigious position in Germany, a move that would really define the next chapter of his life and his research. But here's what I find so fascinating about his move. The reason he went, he was offered a job that specifically came with more time for research and less time teaching. That one little detail, it tells you everything about what drove this guy. He was all about pure, unadulterated discovery. Okay, so let's dig into the work itself, the stuff that actually won him the Nobel. What are these laws of chemical dynamics and osmotic pressure that the Nobel Committee thought were so incredible?
All right, first up, chemical dynamics. Just think about cooking. Why does an egg cook way faster at a high temperature than a low one? Well, that's chemical dynamics in action. Van Hoff actually came up with the mathematical rules to explain how things like temperature control the speed and outcome of reactions. This was a huge deal. It took chemistry from just, watching what happens to actually being able to predict and control it.
And the other piece of this Nobel-winning puzzle was his work on osmotic pressure. Now, this is a concept that explains stuff you see in nature all the time, from how plants drink water right up to how our own cells work. It's really all about how solutions are always trying to find a balance. Let me break it down for you. Imagine you've got this special barrier. It's called a semi-permeable membrane, and it's separating two liquids. On one side, you have a really high concentration of something, say salt dissolved in water. On the other side, it's not so salty. The water is naturally going to move across that barrier to the saltier side to try and even things out. And that force, the push that makes the water move, that's osmotic pressure. And Van Hoff, he was the guy who figured out the law that describes it perfectly.
But here's the thing about Van Hoff. His genius wasn't just limited to his Nobel-winning stuff. No way. His contributions were so massive, he's actually seen as one of the founders of a whole new field of chemistry.
And that field is called stereochemistry. See, before him, most chemists kind of thought of molecules as flat, like drawings on a page. He was one of the first to really get that molecules have a 3D shape, and that shape is everything. It's crucial for understanding their properties and how they react. It totally changed how we visualize the world at a molecular level.
Of course, brilliant ideas are one thing, but you need a place for people to talk about them, right? To debate them. That's why Van Hoff helped start a brand new scientific journal. It became the place to publish all these revolutionary new ideas about 3D molecules, and it allowed the field to just explode. So he wasn't just a scientist doing experiments, he was a community builder, an architect for a whole new way of thinking.
Okay, so let's put it all together. When we look back at this very first Nobel Prize in chemistry, what's the lasting legacy of the guy who won it? What's the big takeaway from Van Hoff's amazing career?
Well, his legacy is just huge. It's everywhere. The laws of osmosis he figured out are essential in everything from biology to medicine. The principles of chemical dynamics are basically the engine running modern industrial chemistry. And of course, his work on 3D molecules gave us a completely new lens to see the world. He didn't just add to his field, he fundamentally changed its future.
And this is maybe the most important thing to remember. Jacobus van Hoff didn't just make one discovery. He, along with some of his peers, basically built the entire field we now call physical chemistry, the science that bridges the gap between physics and chemistry. He gave them the theories, the language, and even the place to talk about it all.
And all of this really leaves us with one big question.
Van 't Hoff's story proves that pioneering science isn't just about a single eureka moment. It's about deep thinking, it's about building frameworks, and it's even about creating platforms for other people to build on your work. It really makes you wonder, what does it truly take to build an entire new branch of science?